Wes Sargent. I operate the Sargent Ranch here, family ranch. We started to implement a lot of grazing, chopping up a lot of the pastures with polywire and high tensile. I got kind of tired of the little quarter-mile hand rolls, so I built this deal. It's pretty crude, but it works well. I put a little electric motor on it, and then there's a big pulley on this shaft that runs through the spool, and it's just a belt-driven deal, and I just got a 12-volt deep cell battery on it. And then there's a box here for all your posts. We use the pigtail type posts. But yeah, you can just hook your wire on to the end and head out and string it out, and it'll just freewheel. And then when you want to go to pick it up, untie it all, and then just wind her up, and it'll get rolling pretty good. You can wind up a mile in about 5 minutes. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of all there is to it. I've got a backup hand crank you can pin in this side in case your battery dies, and we just hook it on to a side-by-side and chopping up whatever you want to chop up, and it's pretty simple other than that, I guess. Really just kind of work with the existing fences and the existing water and just kind of how they use the pasture. And if there's a piece that I want in or out of the pasture, might be a little native chunk in there, or a little chunk of tame grass you can fence out, or if it's just a big chunk of tame grass, I'll just cut it in half according to where the water is. And so for fencing power, and it depends, a lot of these high tensile setups are set up on a 110 plug-in type deal, and they'll run quite a few miles off of that. And if I'm chopping something up, I'll just tie into that. But if it's out on its own, I use a 12-volt solar system. Yeah, there is some challenges with grounding. A ground wire helps a lot. If that isn't enough, usually use like 2 to 3 long copper rods and try to keep, if you're really having trouble, you can wet down around the rods, wet it down good with water. If it gets really dry, that's when you'll have the challenges with your grounding. For the most part, if you have a ground wire and you ground to that, and we use all pipe posts, and so they help ground it pretty good too. When you first build like a string of high tensile, you can have some issues until they kind of figure out where it's at. But typically, antelope especially, won't know it's there for a little bit, and they'll run into it and raise a little cane with it. But usually they'll just knock some insulators off, and within a week they'd figure out the fence is there. You don't have any troubles after that. If you don't get that high tensile super tight, it very rarely ever breaks. Polywire can get scattered a little bit. Antelope will scatter it around a little bit, but it's the same thing. If you're within a day or two, they have it figured out. And if you keep it hot, it stays pretty decent. We started everything kind of on poly and kind of got the feel for how we wanted to do it and if it was going to work. And then if it wasn't working, we'd adjust it a little bit. And then when we got to where we thought it was going to be a pretty good system, we just did it in high tensile to where it's going to be pretty permanent. And then you can chop up within your high tensile permanent paddocks. You can chop up within them with poly if you want. I like high tensile better. I try to get as much of that on the landscape as I can. I don't particularly love polywire, but it's a good tool. Yeah, we're trying to have a couple main systems of high tensile, and then you can just tie off of that wherever you want with poly if you need to. We chose high tensile over barbed wire in a permanent fence because the cost of building it is substantially less, and also the time it takes to build it. If it's good going, you can build close to a mile a day, where barbed wire, you might get a quarter mile done, and it's going to cost you probably in excess of 5 or 6 times. The shift into hot wire really wasn't too big of a deal. As long as you have a hot charger on it and you got a good ground, the cows really aren't too hard to train to it. I guess the big thing is to just keep it really hot and make sure you don't have any faults in the line, and the cows will train up really quick. They're not hard, and we get stockers every year. If you kick them into a paddock of high tensile on that 110 power, they'll be trained up. We have a system over here that is chopped. It's dissected like that, so it's got 4 pastures, and they come to the center for water. And I guess right around the tank gets maybe a little bit heavier used right around the tank, but you're moving around those 4 pastures quick enough that it's not too big a deal. And they all have water on the outsides of those. Having more than one water source is very key to any pasture, and I would encourage, if you can, to have even a third or a fourth. I mean, the more water, the better, and it just is a better utilization of the whole pasture. And if one water source happens to go down, then you're not just scrambling. The labor that is involved with poly wire, it's pretty easy. I would say, I don't know that it's less than patching up some broken wires, but we can string out a bunch of poly wire in a little bit of no time. High tensile electric wire is very, very maintenance free. Most things we ever do to it is replace a broken insulator or popped off insulator once in a while, and that's probably it. Economically speaking, making the switch to smaller pastures, it's just better utilization of pastures. We get better breed ups. They're in smaller pastures. The bulls can cover them a lot better. They're always on fresh feed. The calves gain better typically. There's a lot of upsides to it. It's hard for any, you would just have to figure out for your own operation. It's probably hard to put a number on what you might gain out of it, but it's substantial. Yeah, bull to cow ratio, we were doing about a bull to every 20 to 25 cows. Now we're crowding more around 35 cows to every bull. So there's another cost savings, I guess. When bulls are 8 to 10,000 a piece, that can be pretty substantial. And it actually makes the cow moving quite a bit easier, where we used to have to go through a barbed wire fence and sit there and let them pair up for an hour. Now if I kick them through an electric fence, I just kick them through, and yeah, the cows will run back underneath the electric fence, but they figure it out. I don't even mess around with pairing them up anymore. A lot of the stuff that we have chopped up was hay fields that we typically used to spend all summer haying, putting up winter feed. And now a lot of these hay fields are what we're grazing all summer. And so that gave us the ability to stay on that tame grass all summer long. And we're saving all of our native range for winter grazing. And we can typically get by pretty well the whole winter, unless it gets really severe, without feeding any hay to the mother cow. So the cost savings when it comes to equipment, we do own haying equipment. We're all dry land. We have no irrigated. And so when it's a super good year, we'll put up some hay with our own equipment. It's older stuff that we just kind of keep running. It's nothing special, but it'll put up a little hay if we needed to. The cost of replacing it is astronomical. Not anything that we're interested in doing with the amount of hay that we would put up with it. Yeah, so we usually try to buy a little hay if it's reasonable and it's close. Or we have a few neighbors that put up some hay, and we don't have to put a lot of freight into that hay, so we'll do that. To just have some hay in the stacks, we'll feed some calves and cows if it gets really bad. We typically don't have to feed too much for cows.